Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Gray, the creative director for the New York Times live conversation series TimesTalks. For 20 years, TimesTalks has paired New York Times journalists with the brightest and boldest minds from the fields of film, theater, art, literature, and social justice. I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's event with award-winning director, producer, and writer Spike Lee, one of the most provocative and directional auteurs of our time, here to discuss his new film, BlacKkKlansman. The film follows the surprisingly true and improbable case in which Black police detective Ron Stallworth applied to and was ultimately granted membership to the Ku Klux Klan. Moderating tonight's conversation is Charles Blow, a journalist, commentator, and op-ed columnist for the New York Times, who writes about politics, public opinion, and social justice. In tonight's conversation, Blow and Lee will attempt to unpack the political and cultural relevance of the film, how progress can always be repealed, and how racism in America is far from over. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Charles Blow and Spike Lee.
So I'll try to keep this very brief so that we'll get enough questions from you guys. We'll run for about 55 minutes. And I'll ask a few questions. I know this guy, so this will be breezy. So Spike, let's start at the beginning. How did you get involved in the film? How was it born?
Jordan Peele called me up. Get Out Fame, give it up for Jordan. And he said, I have something you might want to be interested in. I said, all right. So it was a 6 or 7 word pitch. Black man infiltrates KKK. So I said, is it true? He said, yes, this sounds like the David Chappelle skit. He says, no, all true. It's all true, and he sent me the book. And
is that the shortest pitch you've ever accepted?
That's Hollywood high concept. We had to break it down to Black man infiltrates KK. That's 6 words. Ku Klux Klan. High concept.
So you get the book. Do you then meet with Stallworth himself? Or
No. I didn't meet Ron till we began, we had the read-through. Mm-hmm. And he spent most of the time with John David Wash, who gives a wonderful performance in this.
Absolutely.
But the first thing I asked Ron is how the Klan on the other end on the phone not know that you and the other guy, the white detective had to play you, he said they didn't get it. But I had to write a scene.
Yes.
Because I knew the audience would think the same thing I did. So we have a scene. Yes, I have the scene where Ron is trying to teach them how to speak black or whatever you want to
say. So was your fascination with the film just this fascinating story, or was it appealing to you as something that needs to be told now?
Well, my co-writer and I, Kevin Wilmot, we knew this could be a vehicle to talk about what's happening today in this topsy-turvy, upside down, was fake is real world. And by doing that, we had to find things in the script that automatically would ring bells in people's head, like, that shit is happening right now.
Right.
And that's what we did.
You purposely take several swipes at that guy who's in the White House.
I don't even say
right
his
now.
name. I call him Agent Orange.
Yeah.
Shout out to Busta Rhymes. He came up with that. One of Brooklyn's finest, Busta. Agent Orange.
There are quite a few in the narrative part of the film.
Right, because so many of the phrases that he says was espoused by the Klan back in the 20s, against immigrants, with the influx of immigrants coming to this country. That's where American First started. I mean, it's not new.
So was that part of this? There's a preface on the film before you get to the narrative piece. Could you explain to this audience like what that is and
The first scene?
the first scenes and the kind of speech part in the beginning?
Well, the first scene is a shot that's considered one of the greatest shots in the history of cinema. It's the crane shot from Gone with the Wind, where Scarlett O'Hara is walking through all the dead and wounded bodies of the Confederacy. I think it was in Atlanta. And then it starts in a close-up, and the crane keeps going, and Scarlett O'Hara keeps walking, and then it ends on it. When the crane reaches apex, it ends on a tattered Confederate flag. And then we have like this followed directly by another scene played by the great Alec Baldwin playing this. It's like a racist PSA. And then the movie starts.
So why put those as a preface to this film?
Well, cinema's been, and if you look at the history of cinema, has been very, and then I like to say this, which we dealt with in the film Bamboozle, which came out in 2000. We're a little over 100 years of cinema, a little over 50 years over TV, and those two great memes have dehumanized African Americans, women, the gay population. Can't leave out Native Americans. You look at those bullshit films by John Ford and John Wayne where they were savages, and so these things influence how people think around the world. I've always felt that one of the reasons why, the main reason why the United States is the world power is not because we have more nuclear bombs, it's because of culture. When you export culture, that shows how you're powerful, because you're influencing how people eat, how they dance, how they talk. When you have a Chinese kid spin on his head, I mean, that's hip hop.
Right.
That's the influence of hip hop, which was born in the South Bronx,
Right.
the boogie down by Puerto Ricans and African Americans. Right. That's where hip hop came from. Hip hop, not just rap. It's MCing, graffiti, break dancing. All that is the pillars of hip hop. So it's culture. Rock and roll, the blues, all that stuff is culture. And it dominates, influences how people act, for good or bad.
Right.
We have a scene in the film where the late, great Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael, talks about how growing up as a kid, he used to go to see the Saturday matinees, Tarzan films, and he was so brainwashed, like a lot of other black people, he was rooting for Tarzan against the Africans. And he made
which they keep making that film.
Yes.
Avatar is that film too. I mean, like it's just
same thing.
keeps
And then
being
he
made.
said how, an example, he said, that's like a young Jewish kid in Nazi Germany cheering Nazis taking his parents away to the concentration camp.
Right.
That shows, that's another example. And also, that scene, we didn't write. Those are all a compilation of the best part of Kwame Ture's speeches.
We actually have a clip from that part of it.
That's a good
That's the
segue.
clip number 3. If you could play that, please.
Corey Hawkins is an actor.
Yeah. Now, in addition to what he's saying there, I found that to be one of the most beautiful parts of the film, that whole stretch of it. And I just want you talk about your decisions about why you shot it the way you shot it. To me, it was just.
That was in Sunday's Times.
It was it?
Arts and Leisure section.
Okay.
You don't read the paper?
I don't read all of it.
You don't read,
I don't read the whole
that's,
thing.
That's the thing you got to read. It was on the front page of Arts and Leisure section Sunday. Where you at? Where you at, my brother?
What was the title of my last column? Exactly.
Agent Orange gotta go. It's the same subject. That motherfucker gotta go.
But it felt like portraiture a lot. It was a lot of close-ups, and it felt to me like you were saying to the audience, you will be forced to confront Black beauty and Black power because I will put it in your face. And it wasn't just the stars of the film, it was just people, Black people and Black faces and really close up. And is that intentional? Am I reading that right?
Was it intentional?
That's
intentional. I mean, that just can't happen by happenstance. What we did was, film opens Friday. What we did is that we had this. We shot in the bar in Red Hook, which is also a club. So we had the general thing, but we had a side room where we were snatching people out of their seats and filming their portraits, and then we just put it together in the editing room. But we wanted to co-sign what Kwame Ture was saying, and for the people who are not of color, just try to imagine if your life, if you were told you're not beautiful, you're not smart, you're subhuman, and forget it, but this is before movies and television, just again and again and again, and you dehumanize, over time, you start to believe that.
Right.
And I remember, I lived in my parents were woke, but there are a whole lot of people did not get it to James Brown's. In fact, today is the anniversary when that song was recorded.
Wow.
Say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. And that was like an atom bomb went off amongst the Black community, because we've been told forever, that we weren't good as white folks, no matter what. And then you tie that in with the white woman who's put on the pedestal of beauty.
Right.
And all that stuff, has a terrible psyche. And this is something I've been thinking about. People talk about post-traumatic stress. I think African American, we're still dealing from slavery. We have post-slavery traumatic stress. I think that stuff is in our DNA, and we're doing shit that's crazy. We don't even know why we're doing it. Some Einstein could probably have a formula for, but I believe that there are many things that we're doing is connected to hundreds of years of being enslaved.
Wow.
I believe that.
Right.
You believe that?
Absolutely. And there's new research about how.
They're starting to do studies about that.
Yes, stress.
Forget
can be
about
transmitted.
Wars. For years they said it was some other stuff, like you were shell shocked. But now, I think with the technology, they could go back in the research. We still got stuff that's happening from slavery, where families were sold, broken apart, and one of the things that I've been doing, I've been on the bandstand banging the drum for this film, because we gotta get people to come out. But I say this all the time, that this country, the very fabric of this country, the foundation of the United States of America, is based upon the genocide of Native Americans and slavery. And until we agree, it's a fact, so it's not even debatable. But that's where everything, if we're gonna, all this does happen, race, whatever, if we don't come together on a fact that the very thread that, dear Betsy Ross, she sewed the flag. That thread is dripped in blood. And we've been taught lies. I'm a product of New York City public school from kindergarten, went to John Dewey High School in Coney Island. You went to Dewey? All right. And we're taught lies. George Washington cut down a cherry tree. They used to be telling us that George Washington owned slaves.
And possibly took out their teeth to put them in his dentures.
I mean, and let's not even talk about Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings.
Right.
So, how many? What was the first 9 presidents owned slaves? Something like that.
Yeah.
So when people start talking this bullshit about the founding fathers owned slaves. And we go to the Constitution, it says slaves are 3/5 of a human being. So that's what this country is built upon. And anything else, if that's not told the truth, then we're still living a lie.
Yes, sir.
I was reading you too much, right?
Apparently not. All right. So one thing you said in there, like, white women have been put on a pedestal. I was fascinated by your treatment of the white wife of the Klansman.
Never seen that before.
Right. So, this, in a way, it kind of revealed something that people have written about and talked about, which is that it was white women who maintained white supremacy in the South in its soft ways. The teachers, the PTAs, the people who, the dress shop owners, the people, all of that little stuff was maintained by those women. And much of the violence inflicted on black men in particular was connected to or justified by the protection of white femininity. And she comes across when you first see her, it's just this bubbly, the nicest person in the world. And you you think, as soon as I saw her on the screen, I thought, oh my God, she's so nice to be married to the Klansman. And you realize, no. So can you talk a little bit about your decision there?
I never saw that before. I wanted there's a scene where her and her husband, they're in bed,
yes,
all cuddled up, and she's like, "Oh, I just can't believe it's gonna happen." He says, "What? Yeah, we're about to kill some niggas." I mean, it's a really a sick romance,
yes,
pillow talk scene. But to talk about the co-sign what you're saying, I left out the other one. The 2 films which we attack in this film were considered 2 of the greatest films ever made. Gone with the Wind and Birth of a Nation.
yes.
So we have clips from that film where you see the white woman who rather leap off a mountain
Exactly.
to her death than be touched by this barbaric brute. And that stuff's, that was made in 1911, which people forget. At that time, the KKK was dormant. When Deidre Griffith made this film, it was like the blockbuster of the time. It was screened in the White House. Woodrow Wilson's famous quote is like writing history with lightning. And because of that film, it brought about the rebirth, resurgence of the Klan, and consequently, black people got lynched, castrated, hung, burnt, whatever. And there's a fallacy that they did that to black women too. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, black women who were pregnant. Mm-hmm. So this country has a very, very dark history, and we're still grappling with, dealing with this now.
And not only that, but you deal with like multiple layers of racism in this film, from police culture, police brutality, code switching. How does that relate to now? Like, how all those things, those racial topics that you're exploring there, how do they relate to what we're experiencing now? Were you trying to do the mirror?
Well, I think that we have an individual in the White House who is, I don't even, for me, it's beyond a dog whistle. He has a megaphone, some 20,000 amp microphone, and it's not even trying to be slick about it. And, he wants to get his folks together and, get them ramped up. So they're not trying to be slick about it, coy. It's blunt.
Right.
It's blatant. And no matter what he says, it's obvious, to me at least. Right. And the thing about him, the thing about Agent Orange, whatever he says first, that's in his heart. Don't believe the statement that comes 3 days later after they walked him back from the ledge. In Charlottesville, he said that famous thing, there's bad people on both sides. What he said that day, I feel that's in his heart. Not the retraction that came 3 or 4 days later. And if you study that, it's a whole line of stuff
there was no real retraction there.
What?
There was no real retraction there.
But but it was.
Yeah, they tried to do something, but it wasn't.
But that image went around the world, of him saying that when the supposed cradle of democracy and the most powerful man in the world has a chance to say no to hate, to racism, to fascist, whatever you want to call them, and he doesn't do it. Doesn't do it.
And another thing that you touch on is the kind of waffly nature of allies in the struggle. And there's another clip we have. I think this is clip number 1. If you could play clip number 1, we'll talk about that one.
I didn't want to say what trap, but that Peckerwood had a gun in my face. And he was an ass hair away from pulling the trigger.
And he didn't.
But he could have. And then I would have been dead. For what? Stopping some jerk-offs from playing dress-up?
Flip, it's intel.
Well, I'm not risking my life to prevent some rednecks from lighting a couple sticks on fire.
This is the job. What's your problem?
That's my problem. For you, it's a crusade. For me, it's a job. It's not personal, nor should it be.
Why haven't you bought into this?
Why should I?
Because you're Jewish, brother. The so-called chosen people. You've been passing for a WASP. White Anglo-Saxon Protestant, cherry pie hot dog white boy. That's what some light-skinned black folks do. They pass for white. Doesn't that hatred you've been hearing the Klan say, doesn't that piss you off?
Of course it does.
Then why are you acting like you ain't got skin in the game, brother?
Rookie, that's my fucking business.
It's our business. Now I'm going to get you your membership card so you can go to the cross burning and get in deeper with these guys. Right, partner?
That's John David Washington and Adam Driver. What's interesting about this scene is that Adam Driver, his character, Flip Zimmerman, is really like double switching. He's faking that he's in the Klan. No, he's withholding the fact that he's a police officer undercover, and also on top of that, he's Jewish. And when the film played in Cannes, debuted at a world premiere, I was really amazed because not a lot, but people coming to me who were Jewish saying, I know the Klan hated Jewish people. I was like, you're number 2 on the list. If you saw Charlottesville, they were saying, screaming, chanting, right. What? Jews will not replace us. I looked at like, where you been? They hate everybody. Except people who have pure white Aryan blood.
Right. but I just found it curious the way you guys wrote it and they acted it. This phrase "skin in the game," because it seems to me that people, when they don't truly have skin in the game, they pretend to be egalitarian when in fact they are not. Right. So a few years ago at the height of Stop and Frisk, we were stopping and frisking more young black and brown men in this city than there were black and brown men in this city. No, that's not a joke. That meant that if my kids weren't taking a stop, there was somebody taking 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 for them, because they were doing it more often than there were people. And
Giuliani, right?
that was Bloomberg. It blew up. Giuliani started, but Bloomberg ramped it up. And every year, Quinnipiac would poll the people in this city and ask them if they were okay with this. And every year, a majority of white people in New York City said they were perfectly fine because they had no skin in the game. And so it always struck, when I heard that, it struck me because it meant that people felt like they had the luxury of saying what he said: this is just a job for me, it's a crusade for you, right? And that was such a powerful scene for me. And I don't know if it was that important for you in the film, but it was really powerful for me because I see how that plays out for us here.
Yeah, it was a very powerful scene because you see two partners who trying to work on the same goal, and you got to be in. You can't be half stepping.
Right.
Either in or out. And what makes it complex is that historically, especially during the 60s, there was alliance between African Americans and our Jewish brothers and sisters. I mean, you walking side by side with Dr. King, Selma, Montgomery, you saw that. That's not necessarily the case it was today, but there is a history of that. So it fit in with the Klan hating blacks and Jews too. So you also had the putting this African American with the Jewish partner. Right. So it all worked together story wise.
I'm going to ask. I'm going to save some time. Yeah, we have to do questions after this. Audience questions and Facebook Live questions after my question here. At the end of the film, you add a
Coda?
a kind of documentarian sort of a look at what I assume is how you see what's happening in the film and what's happening now as mirror images of each other. Can you talk about that part of the film?
Well, you probably read about it, so hopefully it's not a spoiler for you. The film takes place in the 70s, but it ends in present day. I hate the Hamptons, but I have a summer home in Martha's Vineyard for the last 20 years. Can we get it for Oak Bluffs? No love for OB? Anyway. My home is on the 18th hole at Farm Night Golf Club. I hate golf, but it's beautiful. And the last 9 years, in August, I would see President Obama on the 18th hole. I always know when he was coming because I would see black-clad Secret Servicemen in the trees with their ninja outfits and scopes on their rifles. So this serious business. So last April 11th was a tiki, as my brother Dave Chappelle says, those tiki torch motherfuckers had their march. The Jews won't replace us. Blood and soil. You've seen this footage. And the next day, August 12th, which is coming up, this weekend is going to be the 1-year anniversary of Charlottesville, and that's not by mistake. That's by design. So I got where I was Friday night, so I didn't see that happening live. But I woke up early Saturday. I was watching the news, CNN, and then I saw this horrendous act of homegrown red, white, and blue apple pie terrorism, where this murderer drove a car into a crowd and murdered Heather Hare. So I was shook. So I went outside. I was just tired of watching it. I went outside, and Obama was getting ready to, he was on the 18th hole. It's not funny. And so usually we have a ritual, you know. I wait till he takes his shot off the tee, the 18th hole, then we dap each other and talk. But I said, so after he hit the ball, he's left-handed, and I said, Mr. President, have you heard what happened? He said, Spike, what happened, Spike? I said, there was a murder during the march in Charlotte, so he had not heard. When you play golf, that's 4 hours on the course. You know, he turns his phone off. So he'd been on the course for 4 hours, and you know, I'm on the 18th hole, so he did not know what happened. He said, "You sure, Spike?" I said, yeah, President, come on. And but while I was watching that, I decided that would be the end of the movie, because we didn't start shooting till the fall, and this is April 12th. And David Duke, Agent Orange, the Klan, neo-Nazis, and alt-right, they wrote the ending for the film at the expense of a life. And so I was able to get Susan Bro's number. That's Heather's mother, and because I wasn't gonna use the footage unless she gave me the car. I was gonna use the other stuff. I was not gonna use the footage of the car plowing into people. And so, the best as I could, you know, what kind of condolence can you give to someone who loses their, I mean, any loss, but to lose your daughter like that. And then I told her what the film's about and how I wanted to use the footage, and she gave me a blessing. And so once Mrs. Bro gave me the blessing, nobody was gonna, I don't care who, no one was telling me I could not have that ending. That was the ending. That was the ending.
Nice. So I think there will be, I'm getting Facebook Live questions. There are mics, moving mics.
And can we turn the lights up so we can see
Yes.
our beautiful audience tonight? Give a round of applause for yourself. Thank you.
So as you make your ways to the mic, I'm gonna go to my first Facebook Live question. I haven't read this, so I don't know what I'm gonna. All right, this is Armin from Facebook. If you had made this movie 10 years ago, would you have filmed in the same way? What is different about making it now?
I don't answer hypothetical questions. I mean, the film was made when it was made.
All right.
Get Out didn't come out 10 years ago, so how's he gonna call me?
All right, so I'm going to audience questions. Here first.
Mike, thank you for continuing to make
Thank
challenging
you.
films. As a fellow sports fan, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the role and responsibility of black athletes to be social activists in this age.
Can you just talk to the mic a little? Close
Oh,
to
yeah.
the mic so we can hear you.
Sure.
And repeat the question.
As a fellow sports fan, I wanted to ask you about the role and responsibilities of black athletes in this moment. I was particularly struck that Agent Orange, in his response to LeBron James, used Michael Jordan as a foil and as a contrast to say, be more like Mike.
That's the old divide and conquer.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about that
Shenanigans.
particular comparison.
Right.
And do you think athletes like Michael Jordan have a responsibility or even a greater responsibility now that people like LeBron James and Colin Kaepernick are really becoming leading voices and example setters for social change?
I know you might think I'm biased. He's just a fresh toast. Michael Jordan gets a bad. He gets he does a lot of. He's my man. He's born in my neighborhood, Fort Greene, Brooklyn, Cumberland Hospital. He gets a bad rap. He does a lot of stuff that nobody ever hears about. And for me, that's a true sign of giving. We're not having no big ceremonies, not to knock anybody. We giving is giving, but he does stuff that people never know about. And so I think Agent Orange, it's the okie doke. Let's pit these two brothers against each other. And they were too smart of it. And the first thing Michael said was, LeBron is doing what he's doing for the community is great. He didn't go for it. And I probably think I don't know for sure, but I think they tossed each other after that tweet came out by that guy. But there's I love sports, but there's this is a history of me and my wife Tanya. I used to have arguments, not arguments, but discussions. Like I said, why don't you read the sports page? Because everything that's happened in the world socially, it's gonna happen in sports. Jack Johnson, Joe Louis, Jackie Robinson. I mean, Wilma Rudolph, Althea Gibson, Arthur Ashe, Kurt Flood, Muhammad Ali, Colin Kaepernick. I mean, a lot of these things, I was trying to explain that you cannot, sports makes a difference. Mm-hmm. It really makes a difference. And if it didn't, why is this guy in the White House going crazy on NFL players? I mean, growing up, if you talk about somebody's mother, that's a fight. You can say anything in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, you said about somebody's mother, you start throwing hands. And to call these brothers NFL sons of bitches, and they should be kicked out of. And here's the thing I like to say to answer your question, if I can. The first person to die for this country in the American Revolutionary War was Crispus Attucks. Black people have fought every single war for this country, and many times we've still been treated as second-class citizens. So anybody to say that black people ain't patriotic, they're full of shit. I mean, it's just, we're fighting wars when we still can't vote. People might say, Malcolm was talking about, what's the logic in that? But we historically felt like we believe in democracy, we're gonna fight for our country. Brothers, Vietnam, only 12% of the population, we over-index deaths and mortalities, all that stuff. Come back here, still can't, treat it like a second class. Happened in World War I, happened in World War II. I did a film called Miracle St. Anna about the black soldiers that fought in Italy, and we have a flashback to where the training bases in Alabama.
By the way, my grandfather was in that company.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Love. Let me ask you a question. World War II, We're fighting Nazi Germany, the fascists in Italy, and Japan. Black soldiers are being trained to kill these motherfuckers. Excuse my language. They're trained in Alabama, and the motherfucking Nazi prisoners of war that's sent here in prison, they're treated better than the black soldiers. That shit is crazy. Think about it. We're fighting the Nazis, the Japanese, and the fascists in Italy. War, you gotta kill people. Captured Nazi soldiers are sent POWs, sent back to be on camps, the camps where they're put. They share with black soldiers. And the Nazis are treated better than the black soldiers who have been trained to kill them. WTF? What the fuck? That's insane. That's how crazy this shit is. I think this is Fiji water.
All right.
I got a crazy story. Out of nowhere, Prince calls me. And he says, Spike, what kind of water you drink?
Is that your Prince impersonation?
It's a bad one. I said, water, I drink tap water. He says, no, Spike. You have to drink Fiji water. Out of nowhere, he called me up and asked me what water I was drinking. Swear to God. So I'm going to have, even though they took this label off, I'm going to drink some Fiji water. Because Prince asked me, told me to.
So, we'll go to this side.
This is a question for both of you, I think. I've been paying attention to the similarities between the rallies of Agent Orange and lynch mobs. You know, I just heard a reporter talking about the Agent Orange rally and what a good time everyone was having as they, spewed hatred. And it reminded me of the, postcards from the lynching memorial of these lynch mobs having a party, having a great time, bringing their kids, just like people bring kids to the Trump rallies. And I just was wondering, all of the things that you're saying, and Mr. Lee, and you're saying, somebody can prove this. I think this is true, and I think that's the job of journalism, is to show evidence for these things. But sometimes I feel like sometimes art is better able to make those connections than journalism. And I guess I'm just asking you to maybe compare the different responsibilities, the different ways of looking at reality. And I think for me personally, I'm looking today for journalism to make more of those connections. So
I'll let you go first. 'Cause everybody's here to talk to you.
Who's the question for?
So I'll be very brief because they're not here to hear from me. The comparison I draw is not necessarily to lynch mobs, but it is that you have to imagine yourself being invited and being a participant in the greatest show in America right now, right? They show up to be entertained and to be part of the entertainment. It's a carnival. They bring cameras. They do call and response. It is a participatory show. To them, it is entertainment. And I believe that is part of the reason that they suspend disbelief and allow themselves to be lied to, know that it is a lie, and just say, but it's a carnival though. And having lived growing up, my younger life in a kind of nowhere kind of place, when the big show comes to town, it does create, it's a circus. It creates a certain atmosphere, a coming together, a meeting of the neighbors, us together doing this thing. And I think that he is exploiting that part of America that longs to be part of something bigger than themselves, to be part of the television atmosphere, to be part of the circus, to be part of the chanting, to be part of the thing that people hate, to be the one who is reviled, to be the one that they are jealous of, at least in their minds, that's how they see it. And so I think that he understands entertainment. He has tapped that part in them, their desire to be part of this Facebook kind of social media age. And that, I believe, drives more of it than, kind of a bloodlust, which was what the lynch mobs had.
Has anyone seen this film? One of my favorite films was called A Face in the Crowd. Written by my dear late friend Bud Schulberg and directed by Ilka Kassan. And the film before that they did together was On the Waterfront. This film came out in 1957 and it predicted everything that's happening today. Andy Griffith plays Lonesome Rhodes, some country bumpkin that's snatched out of Arkansas, put on a radio show, and then TV. Please see this film. A Face in the Crowd. They had the crystal ball on this. I mean, it's amazing. They had this vitamin called Vitajex, which is Viagra today. I mean, it's amazing. And it's today.
I'm going to take one more from Facebook, and then I'm going to come to you. Is that okay? So Gina from Facebook asks, what American film, in your opinion, changed the course of how Black Americans are depicted in mainstream culture? And we're going to let you include your films in addition to any others you might like.
What's the question again? What mainstream?
What movie? What is the most transformative movie for Black people and how they're depicted?
That's a hard one in mainstream. I mean, I think probably one of the Sidney Poitier films.
Oh, really?
Won an Oscar. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner?
Yeah. Okay.
But here's the thing, now. I know we're on the clock, but
Sure.
I love Mr. Poitier, and he was in a jam because he knew that he was like Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson was not some mild-mannered, meek person. Branch Rickey sat him down and said, yo, all this stuff, you got to chill 4 or 5 years in the league, then you could go just be a regular ball player. And Sidney Poitier, I believe, was in that same situation. He had, not that he wanted to, but he knew that he was opening the door. And so he constantly had to play the role of the perfect Negro.
Do you see any parallels to that in our last president?
Let me get I knew you were going to try to sneak one in. But if you remember, when he's over Spencer Tracy and what's her name? He uses a phone, leaves a dime on the phone. I remember seeing Lilies of the Field as a kid. I was like, man, you better get out of here before these nuns say you raped her. I was like, I wanted to throw something at the screen. And I was little. Why is he hanging around? Get the fuck out. But those are the roles he had to take. But in the heat of the night, though, he couldn't do heat of the night from the jump. But when he slapped the fuck out of Rod Steiger, wow! My name is Mr. Tibbs. Black folks went crazy. Because we never seen that like that before. But he had to work up to that. Mm-hmm. He didn't do that from the jump.
So is Obama working up to a slap?
Hey, I got to see him on the 18th hole. What are you talking about?
So we're going to go to this.
How you doing?
Like Charles.
Good to see you.
This is really a question for both of you in a sense. Spike, we've been watching your movies from the beginning, and you talked about the ending of this movie. You have often had very strong messages at the ends of your films, I think just to make sure people get it. Today, we are living in a time when we think we get it, but then there's this fake news concept. Between you and all of your films, and now this one, and Charles, you and all of your writing, and just yesterday I saw you fighting and slapping. You slap. Let me talk. Let me talk.
Slap,
you know,
he be knocking
slap
all
it.
over.
I'm not angry.
But in the midst of what the other person was asking earlier, between art and journalism, we're trying to get these messages out loud and clear. And yet, what happens next? Because that bully pulpit, that I call him the resident, that bully pulpit is so loud that there are many people, possibly even people in this room, who might still believe some of these things that are eroding at the character of who we are.
So, Spike, we're gonna go with you first this time.
Well, jumping back to the lady's comment before, I don't know if I misheard the question, but it was like, is it an either-or thing? I don't think it is. I mean, everybody, you got to have the San Francisco 49er, you got the ground attack, and you got an air game. So it's not like you have to do one thing. And that's another thing about the ending of Do the Right Thing, where we had the two
Yes.
quotes by Dr. King and Malcolm. I mean, they both wanted to reach the final place, the freedom and liberation of people, but they went different routes. So I think we get hurt when we always think it has to be one way. There's many different routes. You could do it. I mean, Malcolm was famous saying, like, you better deal with Dr. King, because you don't want to deal with me. So in a lot of ways, he made it easier for Dr. King.
Absolutely.
So we have just got this monolithic thinking that everything has to be done the same way, and if everything's done just one way, if there's a roadblock, how are you going to get around? Because that's the only route you got.
I would just say this one thing. When people choose to believe a lie, that is a luxury.
Can you say that? Can you repeat that, please?
When people choose to believe a lie, that is a luxury that comes with a privilege. And there's some people who simply do not have the privilege of believing the lie, right? And so there's some people in America who feel that they will not be hurt in any way if they allow the lie to exist, or they ignore the truth, or whatever, because their position in the society allows them to forever be protected. There are other people who don't have that long of a leash. There are other people who have had to deal with the truth, the granular nature of truth. That you've had to, what Dave Chappelle says, every black man in America is a bona fide paralegal. You have to know the law. There is no, we don't have the luxury of that, of saying, okay, I'm just gonna believe this for now. So I think reminding different segments of the population that we see you.
Do you think they hear you?
What's the question? What'd you say?
Do you think they hear you outside of whatever we think the
I keep
constituency
the focus
might
on,
be?
well, I don't, personally, and there are people who are evangelicals and people who reach mass markets like this guy but personally, I'm not trying to reach. I'm trying to fortify the people who want to hear.
Fair.
And
Thank you.
And you're doing a great job.
so I think we're gonna bounce over here. I gotta get Spike out of here. So we have another clip. You wanna play that other clip?
Yeah.
Okay, let's play the other clip. Spike is gonna give us some more time. All right, stand there.
Now I want them to go to the theaters Friday. This weekend.
This is a good clip. It ends with, I think, one of Spike's favorite lines in the whole film. So let's play the last clip. I think it's clip number 2.
How do you propose to make this investigation?
Well, I've established contact and created some familiarity with the Klansmen over the phone. I'll continue in that role, but I'll need another officer, surprise, surprise, a white officer to play me when they meet face to face.
That's my point exactly.
Chief, black Ron Stallworth over the phone, white Ron Stallworth face to face, so there becomes a combined Ron Stallworth.
Can you do that?
I believe we can. With the right white man, we can do anything.
That was an ad lib by John David.
Oh, was it?
That was an ad lib. John
I'm
David
sure that
Washington.
you wrote that.
Nah, I didn't write that. I can't. He wrote that. I mean, he didn't write it, but we were on the set. We said, "Can I say this?" I said, "Yeah, go ahead and say it."
All right, so how much you giving us? One more question? How much time are you giving us?
One from each mic.
Okay, there you go. Last 2 questions. All right, go.
I don't know how to follow that up, but I will ask this. Thank you for taking a selfie with me on Myrtle Avenue last Tuesday.
On Myrtle Avenue?
That was me, yes. You know, you're starstruck, and it's like, just sit down. I'll take it, no problem. And I appreciate the fact that you continue to make your movies and things in the hood, because I am from Fort Greene as well.
The fort.
The fort, yes. My question is about something that you said earlier in terms of you teach a world by culture. And I'm a retired school teacher, so how do we continue to teach our children that very thing so that whatever they do, they realize that the culture is what's teaching the world, and that's where the power is?
I think for me, it's a very simple answer. The teaching has to be in the household.
Yes.
But many times there's no moms there. No, and here's the thing, though. There's always been drugs in the black community. Mm-hmm. But crack, we still have not really dealt with, I feel, what crack did to the black community. Mm-hmm. I mean, you had generations of young people who left their own device because their parents were on crack. Mm-hmm. And then they have children. And they're on, I mean, so that we're still, how many years has it been? Came out in the 80s? I mean, I think we're still dealing with this post-crack epidemic. And I mean, I'm not no social scientist, but I don't have to be to know what has happened. And when I was going to Fort Greene, my friends would come over and they would see that my parents in the house. And they would look at us like we were Martians. Your father lives with you? I mean, it's not funny. It's not funny. And then when you have, I don't know what the latest numbers, but I think it was recently 3-4 years ago, 75% of young black men don't graduate. I mean, high school. And you don't have to be a social scientist to know that's the direct pipeline to the joint. So for me, it always comes back to, education. I was very fortunate. My grandfather went to Morehouse. My grandma went to Spelman. My father went to Morehouse. My father was a freshman Morehouse. Martin Luther King was a senior. Martin Luther King III and I were classmates at Morehouse, class of 79. So what I found is that there was this tradition of education. Because it was against the law, I'm dropping science here, it was against the law for black people to read and write. It was against the law. And even knowing that, our ancestors knew that education would be one of the keys for us to elevate ourselves. So even under threat of being whipped, castrated, lynched, or Maslow having a bad day, all three, on Sundays, and the guys are going to church, We're going to church, but we also learn how to read and write. And so I've always felt about, this is the last thing I'm going to say, I always felt about how our ancestors risked their life to educate. And now, even today, we have young, intelligent black kids who are failing class, dumbing down on purpose, because if you're educated, if you speak correctly, then you're acting white. Then you're an Oreo, and you're a sellout. But if you're on the corner drinking a 40, a blunt, pants below, showing your funky drawers, then you're from the hood, you're a gangster. I mean, you're just ignorant. So the whole, for me, I know I might sound like a grandfather, but the whole value system is upside down. And where they, in their young, misguided minds, attach intelligence with being white. And that's not our history. But this is a new phenomenon, because on my block in Brooklyn, we never ever made fun of anybody that was smart. You got much love for being a great athlete or knowing how to talk to ladies. We never denigrated that somebody was smart.
And those same people turn around and say, we love Malcolm X because he was a revolutionary. I'm like, Malcolm read the whole dictionary. I mean, like, the idea, it's strange, right? Because they do lift up revolutionary thinkers, but those people value
And then,
education.
let's be honest, a lot of the culture brought that about.
Yeah.
Music and not all rap, but some of that stuff.
Yeah. Let me get this last question so we can get.
So, Reverend William Barber is leading the third Reconstruction, and he talks about how we cannot be silent. And Charles, you were very voiceful last night with Don Lemon, and bringing it out with.
I'm sorry, brother.
No, don't apologize. And I see your voice growing and growing, because 6 months ago people wouldn't talk about racism out loud, and they wouldn't talk about fascism out loud, and now more and more people are talking about it, and it's out there. And ironically, Agent Orange has helped us by bringing this critical subject to the fore again. And how can it be different this time? How can the ending be different? How can it be finally put to bed?
Oh, that's a very tough question, because I don't know if I have the answer to that. So I have these people in my life I call my literary mothers and fathers, and one of the literary mothers is Toni Morrison, and one of my favorite quotes of hers. She was actually giving a speech. I think it was a commencement address, and she says, one of the greatest effects of racism, I'm just paraphrasing here, not even has to be the intention, but the effect is distraction. It keeps you explaining things that do not need to be explained. And I always tell people, think about how much time and energy you put into explaining things that do not need to be explained. And think about the idea that time, energy, passion are limited commodities in a life. Every moment that I spend trying to drag somebody out of a cave is a moment that I have taken away from loving my family, doing my work, being in my community, reading books, elevating myself and the people around me. And so I say to that, I refuse to give you any of my time. I refuse to give that to you because I'm taking it away from me. and to put onto the oppressed the burden of fixing the defect in the oppressor is another layer of oppression.
Come on now. Come on. Come on now.
All right.
But I just want to end it. If we can end it now,
sure.
and I'm thank you for those words. And again, you know I'm a sports fan. It's the fake play. Hand the ball off to the guy. The misdirection play. That's all it is. A good fake. 11 guys on the defense are chasing this guy. He doesn't have the ball, and the guy has the ball is high-stepping into the end zone. It's the okie doke. And we keep going for it. He puts out a tweet, and we go berserk. And those tweets always come up when he's catching heat. The misdirection play.
Absolutely. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you, New York Times.